Area 58 will be recording this tonight. Thank you. With the permission of the board, I'd like to get oh, I'm sorry, I completely forgot. Capital Outlay. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'd like to open the Capital Outlay Committee tonight, April 29th, 2024 at 7:05 p.m.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
If we could have Sue and Monica come up. I'm sorry, Karen, can you give them just a little bit of the table? We're going to do the grant program for Shane Gives Thanks. You have to clear off all the stuff. This application was submitted about a month and a half, 2 months ago, so I wanted to get this done. This is obviously for FY25. This is not, the funds won't be expended till July 1st. So we have cut our grant program to $10,000 this year from $25,000 in order to save some money on the budget. But Shane Gives Thanks had the application in before those discussions even started. And since he's a local organization, and everybody, nobody has to say what Shane Gives Thanks does. Everybody just knows. So, welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us how great Shane's doing.
Pantry?
The pantry. And also, we want to hear a little bit more tonight, too. Tell us about the Peyton Pack. Because we actually did that last year.
Yes, so your funding
the grant went to
year.
Peyton Pack.
Yes, the funding last year went to Peyton Packs, and with that funding, we were able to increase the kids that we were serving in the Carver schools. We were able to purchase gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, vegan, and peanut-free foods, so we could get more kids on the program because we had a restriction with the allergies because we have to purchase that food. So we were able to serve more kids last year. And the Peyton Pack program is, Shane created it as a take-home meal. So when free and reduced lunch wasn't available to kids, we on Fridays deliver pre-made meals to the school for kids to take home discreetly. If they need it, they can take it. If they don't have to. But it comes with 2 breakfasts, 2 meals, 10 snacks, 2 beverages, and a fresh fruit option. So, and it costs nothing for the child. All they have to do is sign up at an office, or they have to tell their teacher that they'd like to sign up, and then they're enrolled. We get a count, we make them, and we deliver them once a week.
So let me ask you, do you want this grant program for Shane Gives Thanks, or do you want it for Peyton Pack?
Yeah, so this year we're going to do it with Shane Gives Thanks, because we're expanding our veterans program.
Okay.
Food pantry, so we'd like to, we've got, Peyton Pack's really in a good spot right now, so
Good.
now we want to extend it for our veterans.
Yeah, Peyton Pack, Monica brought this, and Sue and Walter brought this to my attention last year, and actually the year before.
Yeah.
And I had never heard of it. This was one of these things that they do that nobody talked about. And I thought it was a fabulous idea. I went and talked to Ron Griffin. That was at a point in the year when he was able to help out a little bit. So the school did. And then last year, because they're 2 separate 501c3s, we couldn't take 2 applications. So it was my suggestion last year that Peyton Pack apply for the grant, and that's what was approved last year. And it's I might as well just set up a recording because it's I'm grateful the town has Shane Gives Thanks, and I'm sad that we have to.
Yeah.
And I don't know how else to describe it. How many present customers utilizing Shane?
1,643.
And how many of those are Carver residents?
1,422.
You got to be kidding me.
So if you take the number divided by the town census count, on average, 1 person on every street in Carver has somebody that comes to the food pantry. Some areas more, obviously more people on that street than others.
It's incredible to me. It truly is absolutely incredible to me that you would think that 1,400 people. I mean, I'm grateful that you have it, believe me.
Yeah.
So, any questions from any members of the board?
And that doesn't include the 100 kids at the school that get their Peyton Packs And then we also have 128 veterans that come every week. So, yeah, it's a huge amount.
Are they not able to request 2 grants for each, one for each year?
They can't because...
Okay. It's the same number?
It's the same number.
Okay.
So we just had him change the wording last year. I checked with council and he says, you can't really, because then it would exceed the $5,000 limit. So, Barry?
I just, you said you were going to use it to expand veterans. Can you talk about how you're going to do that? What do you have in
Yes,
mind?
so when Shane and his papa wanted to create a pantry for military people, where they could come and they could be served by veteran volunteers and kind of be in their own element, because it's very intimidating to go, and there's a whole pride aspect of going to a food pantry. So that started, so every Wednesday we're open from 11 to 2, and that's for military veterans. They can come, shop, get what they need. We've got fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh meats, we've got dairy. There's a huge variety. They get breads and all their staple products. So we did a lot of community outreach and talking to a lot of our veterans and seeing their needs. And there seemed to be a really big need for home delivery, because some veterans, they had either health complications, they no longer drove, or they had to ask people, and it was embarrassing for them, to tell your neighbor, can you take me to the food pantry? So we started a visit of that program, which is just where they can call the food pantry, they can place their order with us, we bag the order, and we deliver it to their house. We get to say hello, we get to visit with them for a few minutes, which is sometimes more important, you know what I mean? Just to be able to say hi to everybody. So we've expanded that, and then we also opened an additional night. So now we're open 4 days a week plus Friday nights, where you can, again, order ahead and stop by after your doctor's appointments, or after work, or after, somebody picks up the kids, and you can shop on Friday nights as well.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun.
Anybody else?
No, I think it's a great program. It's wonderful work.
Anyone on capital outlay? And Mr. Ryan, any comment? Hearing none, I'll gladly entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the Town of Carver grant program to Shane Gives Thanks for $5,000.
Second?
Motion is made and seconded to approve the grant application for Shane Gives Thanks in the amount of $5,000. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and there'll be one abstention. This is 5-0-1. And like you do every year, send us an invoice
Sure.
for the $5,000, and then I'll sign off on that with this, and I'll submit it to accounting, and July-ish, the first couple of weeks, whenever they do the warrant, there'll be a check.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
We really appreciate what you do. Thank you. Sorry for the delays, lady, but I appreciate that, for letting us get that taken care of. So come on down. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening.
Can you
Finance
turn the
committee
microphone
members.
up for that center table, please? Thank you. Turn it up. Just go ahead and speak.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Finance Committee members. How are you tonight?
Well,
Thank you for having us. Everyone should have received a binder. This year, within the binder, Elaine, interim town administrator, we wanted to present a balanced budget. There was some housekeeping and changes in terms of how the order is within the budget. We're gonna, and I'd like to go through each one of the pages so that everybody understands the changes that were made. I'm gonna be keeping track of questions that people have. I've received some questions that I'll bring up during the meeting, so that the people that have been emailing me, that way everyone in the committee is aware of the questions that have been asked, and we can go around for discussion so that everyone understands the budget. I know it can be a bit confusing, just in terms of the way that it's set up. And I think we could just walk through and then I can explain how the budget has been set up.
Floor is yours.
So within your packet, while working with George Sarnier, who had been working on this for multiple months, 7 to 8 months, and with Elaine, it was a very collaborative effort in looking at how we could address being able to allocate funds into stabilization funds, being able to balance the budget so that the departments have the money in order to complete the services for the town, and then providing transparency that you had requested at the last select board, we had a select board meeting where members really wanted to see more transparency in terms of where the revenue sources were, how we were coming up with the salaries, and looking at the amounts for each department. So within your packet, we have presented, in the first tab, you're going to find your revenue sources. The revenue sources represent the amount of revenue that we used to balance the general fund budget. You then have your salary and expense summary, which has a total of your salaries.
Can we ask a question on that, or should we wait till the very end?
Oh, sure. Would you?
Well, I'm just, if we're going to move on, can we just?
Okay, yes. So if you want, we can start with page 1. So page 1 is your revenue. So in order to balance the budget, we have $52,952,876 worth of general fund expenditures for the town. That money, those expenditures are going to be paid for through the revenue that we receive through the town. So the first part is your tax levy. That's at the $33,446,707. Your local receipts. We have projected at $3,857,047. Local receipts consist of excise tax, different building fees, non-recurring revenue that the town receives. So we have an estimate of $3,857,047. We also are funding the balance through available funds, and these are funds that will be available in FY25 that will be used in order to balance the budget. One is $1,028,771. Ambulance receipt funds are used to cover the expenditures for the EMS, a medical emergency services department. So their expenses pretty match the revenue that comes in. This particular this revenue, if you look in previous warrants, has been in a separate article than the general fund. But emergency management services is under public safety, so this year you'll see that budget under public safety. So a lot of the things that what I've done is categorize it under the department of where the expenses reside. So you have ambulance receipts, you have cemetery, and then we're using in the operating budget $859,690 in free cash, and then we have state aid at $13,740,661, what gives us our total revenue of the $52,952,876. The free cash number that we received is around $2.1 million. However, for the operating budget, we're only using $859,690 as one of the revenue sources to cover the budget. One thing, if you look at the warrants that you have for Carver in the past, you didn't have a revenue summary page that listed the total revenue budget that we use in order to balance the budget. And then we'll go through and I can explain.
Was that just for the last 2 years? Because we, Or you mean just in the warrant?
I've
So we
only-
used to get a spreadsheet.
I've looked at warrants going back to like 2017. Some of the prior years, like going back about 4 or 5 years, I saw some information where there was more information in terms of revenue, and it had a breakdown of expenses. The format was set up a little differently, but I'm really referring to the April 11, 2023 warrant,
Yeah.
and just information in terms of people being able to see what revenue are we using from the town to cover the expenses. The balance of the free cash is being used to cover capital projects. And so at the last meeting, we were really looking at how to, and as I mentioned before, with a short period of time, we really need to at some point in the summer, sit down and strategically look at, the 3 to 5 year plan, operating plan for the town, our revenue sources, increases in expenditures as we move forward. But for this, that was where we came up with the revenue in order to balance the budget. And I can move forward to the next pages. Are there any questions
I'm gonna ask
on
this.
revenue?
I was going to ask about the free cash.
Okay,
So
go ahead.
I
See if our question is the same.
why wouldn't we just put the 2.1 here?
So for your revenue, you're always looking to balance the budget. As we look at information, behind the scenes, as we're looking at balance the budget, the balanced budget is showing the total amount of revenue. We usually don't show a surplus revenue budget and then an expense budget. Usually it's a balanced budget just showing the amount of revenue that we're using. One thing we can do, if you like, is part of the revenue, we can include the free cash certifications, but we're not using the entire free cash certifications. Just as in previous years, you haven't used the entire amount of all of the free cash that's been certified by the DOR. The amount of free cash has been used to cover different projects that have been determined by the town.
So we haven't seen the warrant yet. There used to be like a free cash page on there, right? That would tell us where everything goes. Is that going to be worth 2.1 million or 859,000?
As I go through it, the amount that you're soon to see in the warrant is going to total $2.1 million.
Okay.
859,690 is going to be used to cover the operating budget, and the balance is being used to cover capital projects. So as you're looking throughout the warrant, you're going to see where anything that is tax levy, state aid, local receipts is considered, the term is called raise and appropriate. So you're going to see that throughout the warrant where the, to the town meeting authorizing us to appropriate a certain amount of money, which will be covered through that amount of revenue.
So, you might understand that we're using some free cash to balance out the budget, and I'm assuming this is before the split. So the schools are going to benefit from 68% of this $859,000?
I'll walk through the split share, because I want to really explain that share, because when we get to that page, I would like to go through that, because the share, we're not receiving a certain amount of money from the school department. So when you look at the shared costs are all operating costs that are in the general fund budget and your operating budget, which you'll see in, your Article 4 of last year. The shared costs determine how much the school department has for their budget, but we don't get 68% revenue. They don't take 68% of the revenue and then they give that to the town. The shared costs are only used in order to determine how much the school department is allowed to spend. And I can walk through that because there were changes that were made from the meeting that we had back in April, in the beginning of April, that had different allocations.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Yes.
So I thought there used to be a line up here that was called the pilots program.
That pilot program, so you're going into the shared cost. The pilot program is
No, the revenue. There wasn't anything up in the revenue. Is that the new growth line?
No, there's no pilot. So for local receipts, consist of your payment in lieu of taxes. So there is an amount for payment in lieu of taxes. So if you're looking at, the Department of revenue sheet, there is a section that they allocate for payment in lieu of taxes. We have 16, we have solar companies that pay us money. And when we met before, part of your financial policies dictated that from that pilot program, and I'll tell you the amount that we had.
It was supposed to be a third, and a third, but
Yes.
then that got screwed up and didn't get voted on at town meeting. Then it became just a third for the middle high school, and now it looks like we're throwing the entire pilot program in the levy.
I thought last year there was a line up there called pilot, that's kind of why I'm wondering.
So there's no way to break out this local receipts to designated money, or am I incorrect?
No, so within the Department of Revenue, for local receipts, the pilot revenue is part of, it's listed in DOR as a portion of it is under the payment in lieu of taxes, and the other portion is net, is within your levy, in terms of how it's been reported.
I think I'm still confused.
I think she's saying it's in this add 2.5% of levy.
Yes.
So she's saying the pilot, that old pilot program is in here now,
But that puts it in
the levy.
the levy. So that puts the entire, all the pilot programs is now going to be in the levy.
I think if we go to the shared costs, that's where you have allocated your pilot, that's where you've allocated in the past, where you wanted to use that revenue. So the pilot revenue, for the solar panels, you're looking at around $1.3 million that I had mentioned before.
That's about the right number.
Yeah, $1.3 million. And that pilot program, from your policies, you would want it a third going into different stabilization funds. I believe it was a stabilization fund, the debt stabilization in I believe the middle school.
It was going in
the
OPEB,
middle school
and
capital
then middle school.
reserve fund.
Right.
And OPEB, the OPEB line.
Yes, and OPEB. So as we go through the expenditures of the budget, we would not have been able to provide a balanced budget to you with $1 million going into the 3 different stabilization funds. And as we look at last year's budget, and we had a meeting about the financial policies, and having another conversation about how we can allocate that third and a third and a third in a way that we can still be able to cover the services and pay for the services in order to operate the town. So if we had allocated that $1 million into the third that you would like, we would not have been able to provide a balanced budget, and then would have been cuts that would have had to been made both on the town side and on the school side.
But
So-
are we allowed to just say that
Well, the
we're
only
not going to
thing-
do it?
The only thing that was approved at town meeting, the only thing that Bob Fennessy and I could find, and we went all the way back to 2017 through the minutes, the only article that was ever mentioned was the pilot program money, a third of that to be allocated to the middle high school building fund. The other 2 accounts never were on the warrant. Now, they may have become policy, but they never made it to the warrant.
Okay, so did that happen?
So what we did, as we go through so if we go to the next page, we go through the shared costs, I can walk through where you would see that pilot. And as we were looking at putting this budget together, we wanted to make sure that we were listening to what you said at the last meeting. You wanted to be able to put money away to reserve. It's not a third, but we wanted to make sure that we had money allocated to the stabilization, that we had money allocated to OPEB, that we had money allocated to the middle school.
But Alan just said we voted in a warrant that it had to be a third.
A third had to go to the middle high school. Now, I do
So-
understand we have to change the wording of that because we can't put the money in a building fund, otherwise the state will use that money and take it against whatever they're going to give us. But it can certainly go into a feasibility study or pick a name for it that doesn't say the word building fund, and then we could use it for a feasibility study for a new middle high school if and when the day ever comes.
Yeah,
But
so
that was an article that was passed at town meeting, so I'm confused as to how suddenly we're putting this money into the budget and no disrespect, and
No, I
so please bear with us. And I'm probably the biggest culprit of this because I tend to get upset by this stuff. When you start putting stuff in the levy, what I hear is the school's grabbing 70%. So for every $1 million we stick in the levy, the school says, this is awesome, we got 700 grand coming. And this is the reason why we started this individual allocations. This is why we did not want certain funds in the levy. Some of these contracts sunsetted, and so forth and so on. And we were trying to keep that from happening. And now we seem to be drifting our way back into it. And then what I'm hearing, tell me please if I'm wrong, I'm hearing that if we didn't do it this way, there would have been more cuts. Well, we started out needing cuts. And now suddenly, we're taking money from everywhere we can get it and we're putting it in the revenue, which means the school's still going to grab 68.5 or whatever the number John's got this week is
Yes, stink bug.
Well, is there,
for out of the revenue.
What's your arm about?
What?
You got a bug.
Excuse me,
won't eat
Mr.
much.
Chair.
The poor thing.
are you saying that you're putting it on the revenue
You don't
side,
bite.
but then it's gonna be it's gonna be accounted for differently in the expense side?
That's correct. So if we go to the shared costs, you'll see how the shared costs were allocated.
Okay, let's
Like
make
you're
it
gonna
easy.
back-
Because-
Let's try to
Let's
make
go
it
to the
easy.
shared costs.
Let's make it
Okay.
easy. Let's go to shared costs.
Hold on, can
And I think sometimes-
Listen,
Yes.
Mr. Powell.
Turn the page?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
So, just a quick
applying
question
for
about
the chair's
the
position.
ambulance
Come on,
receipts.
Yes.
You just made us, you had said that it's gonna offset the cost of the EMS budget, but wasn't the EMS's budget compared to what they take in, like astronomical? So you just taking a portion of
Yeah,
that?
EMS is a wash. We don't take anything from EMS.
Right, what I'm saying is, don't they generate money for the,
Yes. Well,
20%
no, because it goes
or
back into EMS.
okay. I just
Town
didn't
doesn't make any
understand
money off of EMS. Whatever they don't spend,
Okay.
whatever they brought in, it's like their own, they're their own island, and that's the way it needs to be set up. But if they bring in $1 million and spend $950,000, they're 50,000 to the good.
Okay,
We don't get the 50 grand.
gotcha. So
Which
but
is-
they're
we
using
could-
it to pay back their
They're
loans
using
and
it,
everything.
that's right, and that's right. And now, we've loaned them money in the past, where, you know, they wanted to borrow $100,000 toward an ambulance, and then we take it over 5 years or whatever it is, and they pay it back out of the EMS receipts. But we don't realize any profit, if you will,
Right.
from the EMS services. Let's
No,
give
that's-
her a break. This
No,
is the
these are good
first time that
questions.
we're
No, these are
beating
good
this poor
questions,
girl
so,
up.
yeah.
Let's
It's
try
okay.
going to the shared costs and see how that works out. John, you holding up?
So if you want to turn to
Just
section
barely.
3.
Do you have questions about revenue?
Yeah, I got a few questions.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Can you tell me how much free cash was used to balance the 2024 budget? And if you don't have it, you can always get back to me.
I don't have that, but I'll take a note of all the questions,
Yeah, I don't
and
think-
I'll go back,
I don't think we
and I'll
used
look
any.
at that.
I don't think
I
so either.
believe not all of it was used. I'll get that information for you.
Can I just ask, because you're on
Yes.
that? When you said you did the other portion of the free cash for FY '25 is going to go to capital, is it going to anything else? Because I was off a little bit.
No, it's not. It's only going to, so as we go through the expenses, the free cash we're using to cover any transfer that goes into reserve fund. So money that you're setting aside, that the select board has the authority to dictate how that money is spent, is strictly going to the reserve fund. If you wanted to change the amounts that
No,
are,
I guess what I mean is if you said it was like 2,000,001, and then if you added the 1,000,002 that's in capital plus this 859,000, it's not exactly
30,000
2,000,001.
yes, you have around
$30,000.
$1,000 extra. We only are using it to balance the budget. So this is an exercise that's normally done outside. You probably, and I can't speak from previous administrations, but I haven't seen a revenue page in the warrant because I don't know why,
We haven't
but
had one.
the revenue has been the revenue, and when you look at the warrant and what the select board actually appropriates, they're appropriating the expenses with the understanding that there's revenue to cover these expenses as in the language states that they're going to raise and appropriate, or it's from available funds, or transfer from available funds. I just want to show everyone where those actual sources are coming from. So for instance, there's work that's done in operations maintenance that uses money from the cemetery. So as we are putting the budget together and putting to a balance the budget, we're looking at, okay, how this is the amount of revenue. Revenue dictates how much you can spend. So we're just showing this is what we're using to cover the budget. And then, of course, and as we go through, we tried to present a budget so that we had money allocated to the reserve funds. But that's something that the select board could change. They could say, you know, I don't want that much money going into OPEB, or I don't want that much. I want to change it. I want this amount going into, you know, the middle school stabilization fund.
Can they say that even though it was on an old warrant that was
They
voted
can't
for?
do that with the middle school. They can do
Yeah.
it with the other two accounts.
Yeah, for the other two funds, but as we go through the expenses, what we were trying to do was present a balanced budget with the revenue that we had.
It's just hard, I think,
Yeah.
in our heads to see it as balanced because we're not getting that old forecast sheet that used to tell us this is all the revenue that came in, this is all the shared items, and then it, at the end, would say, this is the pot of money left. Now, 70% goes here, 30% goes here.
The last time, if you look at the 2020 town warrant, it will give you the schedule Beth's talking about it would take total revenue, then it would add in the solar monies separately to get a total income coming in, and then shared deductions, your debt, vocational, to get a net number. Then that was split between the town and the school.
Okay.
So that was to try to keep it, specifically keep it out of the operating budget. But if you look at the 21 warrant for 22, that page never appeared again. 22, 23, 24.
We had it, but it wasn't published, I don't think, in the
Okay.
warrant.
But
We
it
didn't
was
really get the
specifically
page
kept out of the operating budget to keep it out of the split.
Okay.
And then, as you're saying, then in future years, it was determined that it had to be used to get for services, and then it just seemed to get absorbed into the operating budget.
Okay, yeah, so I think it sounds like there's been a lot of changes in terms of the shared costs and what should be coming out of the levy, what should be being used for the pilot revenue. And I think that, you know, usually, these are things that we discuss over, 7 to 8 or 9 months, and not, within a week or 2 weeks, in terms of produce a budget. So I definitely want to continue having this conversation. I know that just in lieu of the time that I've been here, we just wanted to provide you with the information so that you can make the decision in terms of having a balanced budget. I know it's not what you might have done 2 or 3 years ago, and I honestly haven't had the time to look at every
Oh, you would hate
warrant
what we did
going
2
back
or
to
3
3 or
years
4
ago.
years ago, but that's why I think having a working group, in the summer, we can hash these things out, but we can go through the shared costs.
Just so you know,
Yeah.
it's not like we've been asking this last week or two, we've probably been asking the last year or two.
Yeah.
For it.
I've only been
It's
here
not
for a
your
month,
fault,
so
you
I
weren't
just...
here.
It's nothing to
Just
do with you.
saying, we've
It's
been
got
asking.
nothing to do with you.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with you.
But I'm taking notes because these are the discussions and the conversations I want to have. I mean, my job is to provide you with a service, to make sure that Carver is financially stable and that we are adhering to financial policies that are set by the select board, and get information from the finance committee. So that's why, I'm taking these notes so that we can sit down and have, a deeper dive into this to make sure that we have the policies that we can stick to. One of the things as I was, going through the budget, I really wanted to be very conservative. Me coming in, I don't know what is in the FY24 budget that may come up where we may need some funds, and we'll talk about that as we get into capital. So I try to be very conservative as we looked at the budget. I was working with George and Elaine because there are some unforeseen things that I see. We, as everybody knows, we've gone from soft right to Vadar, and there's housekeeping that has to be done in terms of making sure that Vadar is updated based off of what you voted. That's not completely done yet. So, just going back and looking at, soft right year-end balances and current balances in Vadar. There's some balances that I couldn't make the decision that they were available because I didn't have enough information. I still have to meet with the outside auditors that have been doing a lot of work, in terms of a lot of journal entries. So there's just other additional things that we need to do, but I just was trying to set a priority, to balance the budget. But if you want, we can go to, oh, yes.
Oh, I just want to make a comment. We talked about this the other night, but you weren't here, and I'm going to make this very brief. Going back many years, 30 or so, there was this is where the split came from. Okay, so we'll just call it 70-30. Okay, and we used to, that's when I was in the school department too. And we'd get 70%, the town would get 30, and, you know, and that went on and on and on for years. And the most important part of that, and let's not lose sight of the fact that that prevents floor fights. Here, at school, you get this much, town, here, you get this much. And that's what you get. Live with it. You know, there's not an endless supply of money. And so it really prevented floor fights, and going on from, and back then too, was well established back then, when we talk about, you know, who needs what, and it got into capital outlay and so forth. There was this very cooperative and congenial approach from all the departments that, you know, we need fire trucks, we need dump trucks, we need school buses. I remember the night that we were in the school department, and we were looking to get 4 school buses. And I walk into one of these joint meetings, probably John was probably there, and Ron Clark says, "Hey, school department, you know those 4 buses you want? You're not getting any." And I said,
Knew I liked Ron.
"Okay, we'll make it work. Because we need something else." And that's how it's always been. But of late, with the differences in how things are approached, this above the line, below the line, the health insurance, you know, coming out of the school department budget and so forth, those are all things that contribute to the need to recalculate the split. And as I said the other night, that split should be recalculated every single year. But it's going to be established, and I don't know who does that, but establish a way that now, here's the split. And next year, maybe there's some nuanced changes that would affect the split in some small way. So it used to be like 70-30, now it's 68-32 or something like it. It's a moving target.
Well, it shouldn't be.
I think it should be.
I don't think it should be a moving target. I think that if their costs go up, then they have to deal with it. I don't know how it should suddenly affect our costs.
But I know, but whatever you got, whatever the split's going to be, that's what you got, so live with it. And but there could be differences between one year and the previous year about, what's above the line, what's below the line, what's this, what's that. And that needs to be looked at and say, okay, here's the new split. We need the split, but it's got to be calculated right. It's got to be calculated fairly, and then there you go. Then people live with it.
But I think this year would be an example of why it would change, because we moved the IT out of school and taken on the town.
And we took the hit for it.
Right, no, it should be the other way around. I get what you're saying, but that's an example of where we could
And there you
tweak
go,
the
yeah.
split a little bit.
These little
Might not be
bit
every year.
differences.
Pulled out
Yeah.
of public safety for the police officer. They gave $80,000 last year to the police department so we could put a cop in each school.
We saw some.
They're maybe giving 10 grand this year. So, we still want to put 2 cops in the schools. Who's going to eat the other overtime? It's us. Is this state aid governor's budget, this is not etched in stone either, right? This is
No.
not, so where do we think that number's going to go, given the
So-
fact that we're broke?
So right now, we use the governor's budget. I think we needed to be very conservative with just the uncertainty of what's happening with the entire state.
Do you think it won't get any lower than this?
No, the House voted and there was a slight increase, but once it goes to the conference committee, and we don't know what that final number, we don't know what that final number is, so even though there was an increase to the House, I didn't want to use that number because I think we need to be conservative there, because the last time we met, there was talks that there could be a decrease in state aid. When the House budget came out, there was a slight increase. There was a decrease in our assessment charges that are charged, because you get your receipts and you have your charges and you have to, you net it out. But I didn't want, it might have netted out to about $6,000 or $7,000 more, but I don't think that would have been a good decision going with the House without having any certainty that there may not be additional cuts or additional reductions because I know that they were looking at excise tax, and some of the taxes that are coming in have been low this year. Their receipts have been low.
Well, that's why the governor gave a 5% surcharge, which would be suicidal for this town on excise tax. But I do think that the select board should look at that other 0.25% increase in the meals tax. It's honestly almost, it's an insignificant number to your dinner out bill. And it becomes a 1% instead of 0.75% in the meals tax that comes back to the town.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, as you're looking at the revenue you brought in for meals tax is listed under your local receipts. Last year, you had $3.9 million that you brought in for local receipts. We're not using that amount. The estimates for FY24 were very, very conservative. They're more around 1.1, 1.2 for last year, which is less than what you're actually bringing in, and it must have been a conservative approach.
Yeah.
So just working with George, they've been working with Elaine and other members of this committee over the last 7 months, so these were some of the estimates that were determined prior to my arrival. I didn't change those projected numbers.
No, I agree, that's fine. But I really do think for the select board, for the two members that are here, I don't think anybody will notice a 0.25% in their meal tax bill or their pizza or whatever it's $100 to go out for a couple to eat now. So now it's $100.75. Who's going to notice it? But 5% surcharge on excise tax, I'd be the first guy out here with the drum beating it saying, it's too much money. And I have a problem with the way that she did that, because that's part of the 2.5%. That's where the $25 a thousand comes from. And then now all of a sudden, okay, money's tight, so you can whack a 5% excise tax bill on a 5% surcharge on the excise tax bill. Well, what's next? The 5% surcharge on the 2.5 levy? Where do we stop at that point? So I don't agree with that at all, but I do think that the 0.25% for the meals tax is like, yeah, okay, why not?
Oh, to you, Mr. Chair, for the local receipts, that's not if we go to page 3, that's not part of the tax levy.
Can I ask one last question on page
yes.
1?
No, I know that. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Thank you. Go ahead, John.
Using free cash, prior year's free cash to balance the current year's budget, isn't that a sign we've got a problem?
No, you can't.
Typically, ideally, you wouldn't want to use free cash.
Once the free cash has been certified by the state, is a year behind. So the amount that was certified in '24 is the only money that I can use going into FY25. If there are previous balance from previous years, but every year they take our balance sheet and they reevaluate how much is actually available. And the amount of money they said that was available for us to use for FY25 is $2.1 million. So that's the amount that I can use. I can't use any other amount unless it's been certified by DOR.
No, I absolutely know that. And typically, we would use free cash in prior years to pay for mainly equipment, capital, one-time items, not reoccurring items. But now we're using it for services. And that's a little bit of a concern to me, that do we have a problem in the future if we're using free cash to balance our budget now?
So the free cash that we've used in the budget was, and as I go through the expenditures, I can show you what expenditures we're using free cash for. The free cash was not used to cover these services for the town. Free cash has been allocated to cover $1.2 million in capital projects and of 800 and around 90 to cover transfers going into the stabilization fund. Your tax levy, state aid, and local receipts was used to cover the operations of the activities and services for the town, and I can go through that as we
Okay,
get to
yeah,
the
we'll go through it.
expenditure page.
Let's give her a break and
So we're
let's try
not
to get
using-
off
we're-
page 1.
And just so you know, through you, Mr. Chair, one thing is that I don't want to use free cash to balance the budget. It's not a good practice. And so that's why the free cash that we've allocated, and as you see the warrant, you'll see that within the warrant, the free cash is only being used to cover the transfers, the money that we're setting aside for the town for rainy day funds, and not to cover the services. I just wanted to make it clear that we're not using free cash to balance the budget because it's not a good practice.
I already have a question on page 2.
Okay.
Let her take a breath,
Okay.
will you? The poor girl.
So,
We threw her under the
I
bus
know.
the minute she walked through the door. She didn't even get to figure out where the light switches were till we handed her a computer
I
and
get
said,
it.
fix this.
what is this? So I thought we could turn to shared costs, so we can go through shared costs.
What tab?
So we're on tab 3.
3.
3.
Oh, we skipped tab 2.
Yeah, we didn't want to hear from you.
I have one question on tab 2.
We can
We can go back. to
We can
tab.
go back to tab 2, but
We're
I
just gonna
thought we
stay with
wanted to
shared
go
costs
over the
and then
shared
we'll back
costs.
up.
Okay,
I promise.
all right.
None of us brought sleeping bags.
Yes. We can go back to tab 2, and that's going to...
Oh, but, okay. I think
Tab-
my tab 2 question's also on this tab.
Yes.
There you go. All right. So you're looking at tab 3, am I correct? School budget projections, is that the right?
So we're looking at FY '25. School budget projections are based on the shared cost analysis that is listed below. The percent that was used for the split was 68.4%. This was the percent that was worked on with George Sarnia prior to me coming, and the draft 6, if people have it, this is the percent that was used. So I didn't change this percent. It's a percent that, I went with. This is the same percent that I mentioned at an earlier meeting in April when I met with the select board. But if you like, we can just go through how the school budget is determined and the changes that were made from the last meeting that we had.
Can you tell us what the percent was last year?
I can look that up and I can
'Cause
tell you
think
what
it
the percent
like
was.
66.
That's what I thought.
No,
67.
I got it here. Last year was 67.8%.
Ah,
So
And
how
then
would it
it
go
What
moved
about
to
the year
60
before?
68.4 this year.
what about the year before last year? You don't have it?
I just don't know how it would go up when the town took on more
67.8
expenses that the school
For the
used to pay
school
for.
last year.
Well, the school had costs go up.
68.4 this year.
Yeah, but it's not based on like the cost.
No, but the school overall budget went up because you got contractual obligations.
It's essentially a $200,000 swing from the town to the school.
On
I guess we
us.
need to see the detail of how that happened. Like did the 81,000 go over?
I'd have to consult George. These percentages were prepared. I mean, I had draft
Yes,
6
that's
of the
fine.
budget that was provided when I came, and I didn't change that percent. I'm assuming that those conversations, having it been draft 6, were discussed in terms of the share. When I met with the select board, I shared the same information with the 68, and nobody mentioned that this percent should have been reduced at that time. If it had been, then we could have gone back and looked to see, okay, maybe the conversations that they had over the last 8 months should have been different.
I don't think we've ever been told the split till today.
No, well, it was on some of the other reports in draft, 2 and
Draft.
3 and stuff like that, but it's just, I find it odd that we're at 68, and I'm not trying to get hung up on percentages, but 68.4%, when 4 years ago, we were at 69, or actually, we were at 70, and then
That was before the health insurance.
we were at 70, and then we took on some of the field maintenance or something like that, and that shifted it to the town, but it reduced the number down to 69. It was like that, gasoline at $3.99.9, it's not $4. So we did that for a feel-good moment in 3 town administrators ago to make it under 70%. It was like 69.85. And now we pull out millions of dollars of health insurance, and it drops the percentage down to 1%, down 1%. I guess I'm confused by the shallow percentage drop and a massive number increase when you look at the health line and the retirement, and it's like they're getting the frosting and the cake and, you know, a couple of candles. And I think I have a little bit of a question as to how we're arriving at some of these. Now, I absolutely hate the school expenses being in the shared costs. We for nothing else, I'd like to see the health insurance say $5,423,812 in two subcategories that says town, school. So we know exactly where we're at with who's costing us the most amount of money in health insurance. I mean, we know it's the school, but we need a number, you know, because they have more people than we do.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I completely understand what you're saying and what you're looking at, and you know, I think these are definitely conversations we need to have, and I think it definitely would be, you know, extremely, it was, you know, hard for me. I was trying to figure out the shared costs and the percentages when I came, where you know, a lot of times you would just have actual split and say, okay, if you have retirement costs or if you have health insurance costs, how much is for the school, how much is for the city, what is the cost for these two different entities, and then figuring out the budget that way. I mean, but as I was saying, I, you know, haven't had that time, but I want to have those conversations, and as I mentioned before, you know, I'm willing to chair a subcommittee that can look at these things and figure out how do we move forward so we don't have to kind of go back and forth and have policies set in place where we know, for instance, we're using free cash to cover this, or we're using, you know, we're using this particular percentage.
Can I just,
Can I ask a question just as a new guy?
Oh, go ahead,
Like, when did, who decided to share costs and?
That was last year, and it was the then finance director and the current school finance executive.
Okay.
They decided this was the best way to handle this because it made life so much easier.
So that's not etched in stone for the future?
Oh,
That was
God,
their-
no.
No.
No, none of this is etched in stone at all.
Okay.
and we weren't, like, we were just told that's
Yeah,
sort
we
of
were,
what's happening.
that's right. We weren't consulted, we weren't consulted on purchasing Veda, Capital Outlay was never consulted about that. We were like mushrooms last year. And you know, suddenly we came out and got paperwork, and I will caution the board, I mean, this budget tonight, as everybody's well aware, we've got till Friday. This has got to be a done deal by Friday, which means tomorrow night's select board meeting, this may necessitate a fall town meeting, but this budget has to be done for the 30 days in advance, and town meeting is June 4th. So there's no, you got time to play with the capital outlay budget, but you got no time to play with the financial budget for the town, because it's got to be out 30 days. And we can't kick town meeting into FY25. So, you know, the game is over as far as that's concerned. We can always take it up in the fall, and by then, Karen will have a much better handle on what we would like to see going forward. And I couldn't agree with her more when she talks about a 3 to a 5 to a 10-year plan for sustainability. You know, we really need to get a handle on this, because like what I can see coming down the road, and I could be 1,000% wrong, but if a lot of these cities and towns are doing overrides just to balance their operating budget, it seems to me that if we're not careful, we're going to be doing the same thing. So it's a concern. So I'm sorry.
I have two more questions. So I know I said this last year because I knew it wasn't done how we used to see it, but we're missing in this, well, the part that says shared operating cost, it's missing the grant program. That was always above the line, and it's not in here. But then the total, this says shared operating revenue. I just want to make sure this is really cost, not revenue.
So when this shared costs were developed, and on April 9th, I provided the select board with a sheet, and it just had, and at the time, we had your tax levy, and then you have your state aid. You have your state aid, and that's net. This amount is net of your charges, school.
Okay, I know, but I'm saying like in the cost section.
Oh, yes.
It's missing the $10,000 for the grant
Well,
program.
it was 25,000.
It was 25,
And it was put in FinCom,
and it should not have
and
been.
it should not have been in the FinCom budget. It should have been in above the line.
Okay, so there's a, so I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So within the shared cost, you're saying that there should be
A grant.
This year, there'll be a $10,000.
a $10,000 grant.
Yeah.
That amount should be within that section?
It should be in that section.
Okay.
Yep. And
I
Before the
can-
split.
right, the
Okay.
previous year, you may find it in the Finance Committee budget for 25,000. It was not, it got put in there, but it wasn't supposed to go in there.
Okay. I understand. The amounts that I was going by that George had worked on, I just want to go over the numbers so you can see the changes that were made
We did tell you.
from the
I-
ninth.
Yeah, I know we did. I
Okay.
know we did.
Well, I can't speak for him, but
Yeah.
whatever
No,
I
no,
can
no.
do.
Well, we know we said something to
Okay.
him,
Just 'cause
but
I feel like
he
I
was
bring
pretty
it up.
rattled with all this stuff, trying to get pulled together also, so.
Now, the $10,000 grant, what is that for? Because as you know, the shared costs in your warrant are costs that are in the operating budget of the town. Can you tell me a little,
So-
can you elaborate a little bit on what that 10,000 is for?
It's like for
What we
Shane
just
Gives
did
Thanks.
tonight, we just did $5,000 to Shane Gives Thanks. That comes out of that grant account. So, 5 years ago, this used to be petition articles, money articles that came before town meeting. You got 10 signatures, and Shane Gives Thanks, Social Community Action, Women's Health Network came before town meeting and requested $5,000 amounts of money to help out the organization. There were no other requirements other than 10 signatures, and it's on the warrant, because it's a citizen's petition. And then we decided that, well, we brought it to town meeting, that FinCom would like to administer this program so that at least we can make sure the money's going to, A, the benefit the residents of Carver, is it going to a 501c3? You know, we'll hold the people that are getting the money accountable. Now, the reason we don't put Shane Gives Thanks through the ringer here to get this year's grant is because we know exactly what they've done for the last 5 years. We know, everybody in town knows. So there's no question as to where that money is going to. Is it benefiting the residents? So that was established, and it was put in it was above the line.
always above the
It was always above the line,
Okay.
because it was the whole town. This wasn't a school item, and it wasn't a town item. It was a town-wide item.
Okay.
So it was 25,000. This year, we voluntarily gave back $15,000 of that grant money, because it's my opinion, if you're cutting budgets, you really shouldn't be giving away free
Okay,
money.
I understand. So this grant, money is that you give grants to organizations, and this is part of the Finance Committee's operating budget where you're able to cover these expenses, but it should also be part of the shared
Well, it
costs.
should be in the shared costs.
Okay, we can add
yes.
that. We can
FinCom
definitely- we can add
administers
that.
it, but
That's
it
no
should be
problem.
in the shared costs.
Whatever changes we make, I mean, we work, we don't sleep, but when it comes budget time, you don't sleep. That's just part of the game. So that's something that we can definitely add in there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So what she's saying is that, we can run till 2 or 3 tomorrow morning, it's all right. I won't be here, but, I wish you the best of luck. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I don't know, might as well jump in on, Elaine started to explain the FinCom reserve. I kind of got lost with that. So you've got 83,100.
Yeah, would you like me to just walk through these and I can
Yeah, can you?
explain the changes that were made from our meeting that we had on April 9th? So the first one, you have, your snow and ice. For the health insurance, the health insurance costs were originally at $5,483,483. The new number for the health insurance was $5,423,812. So that was that was a number that was changed. And then overlay, at one of the meetings that we had, overlay was supposed to be part of the shared cost. It was not in the warrant last year, so I wanted to make sure that it was in the warrant for this year under shared cost. We have the 250. We have the Plymouth County retirement. That was $3,206,235. That didn't change from the meeting that we had in April. We had, excluded debt which is the $1,193,050, and, have copies of the debt service payments that we have. And then we have the non-excluded debt of the $1,310,275. And Old Colony, this is for the tech school, was $1,176,966. The copier lease, we originally had that at $91,100, but the expenses were not that. They were $81,000, so that number got reduced to reflect the actual expenses that will be coming out of the IT. IT pays this, so you'll see that as we go to the expenditures. You'll see this shared cost listed under IT. The second one, so for the FinCom Reserve Fund, when we met originally, it was at $175,000. And then we had the pilot reserve, which is for the the Finance Committee Reserve Fund was at $175. It was, after having conversations with myself, Elaine, George, and a few other people, it was, to my understanding, that 175 should be, the balance should always remain at 175 in that particular reserve fund. When I looked at the fund balance, last week, the fund balance in that fund was $152,800. So the reports that you got over the weekend, because I had to make an adjustment, had $22,200, bringing that fund balance up to 175. But by doing that, that drastically changes the allocation that goes to the school department. And so I kind of went back to the, I had to kind of back.
This isn't a revolving account, though.
Reserve fund. So,
Yeah,
But it used to
I
just
think-
wipe clean.
Well, and I think that you're misunderstanding the purpose of that reserve fund. That reserve fund is, the reason it's got so much money sitting in it right now
Yeah.
is we haven't got to June 30th yet.
Yeah.
So at year end, when the police overtime budget is $100,000 short,
Yeah.
then that's where the money comes from.
Okay.
We transfers out of the reserve account by a vote of the Finance Committee. 2 years ago, we bought O&M a dump truck
Yeah.
because it was half the price of the one that they wanted in the capital plan.
Okay.
And that gave us the ability to do that. 4 years ago, we did it with the fire station and their Cascade machine, which is their air machine that fills their bottles.
Okay.
We guaranteed that money even though they had applied to ARPA. And our contingency was if ARPA denies it, then we'll take the $71,000 out of our reserve and that'll buy your machine. So this last year, we zeroed it.
okay, so this money is, so I think some of the confusion is the way it's worded in the warrant, because when I come into Carver, I'm looking at what's been posted to Department of Revenue and has been certified on the balance sheet and on Schedule A. So within the warrant, it says reserve fund, and so there's certain, there's a difference between a reserve fund and it just being money in the operating budget.
I think
And-
you're right. I think we're calling it the reserve fund, but it's really our operating budget fund. So
Okay.
it should zero out
So we
on
sh-
June 30th.
Yeah, so when I
Yeah.
look at the budget and I see that it hasn't been zeroed out and it's being carried forward year after year after
Right, it
year,
was
I can only
125.
assume that it's a reserve fund. But if you're saying that it should be operating, then we should make that correction and make sure that we just state that this is an operating, I just want to make sure I'm clear,
Yeah.
that's an operating fund
Operating fund.
within whatever budget resides under, and at the end of the fiscal year, we would come to the select board, we'll look at all the balances, and we'll say, oh, somebody may have been over, and we would request a transfer from the select board to cover that, and that money is strictly used to cover any shortfalls that come up within the year.
It's not just
Well-
strictly used for that.
No,
Oh, what can be
and
used
the
for-
And the selectmen can't touch it.
Right, no.
Make that clear. So this is the Finance
Okay, yes.
Committee reserve
Okay.
account.
So the
We have
finance
it here for
committee
that reason.
makes the decision on when
That's
they're going
right.
to use that at the end of the year to cover
Or during the
certain,
year.
yes.
If an emergency
Okay.
comes up, if the air conditioner on the roof blows up tomorrow morning, and Dave doesn't have it in his budget to buy a new one, he'll be in here the following week saying, can we have X dollars out of the reserve account to buy a new air conditioner for the roof?
I understand. So this is money that you want to have in the finance committee's budget.
It's our savings account.
75 now,
She's trying to figure if it's like a balance sheet versus an operating.
yeah.
Like,
Should be in the operating.
yeah,
So this should be
We
an
wipe it out every
we
year.
wipe it out, yeah.
Can I just, a little bit on that?
Yeah.
And
Go
that,
ahead.
and that, everybody's right. Meaning,
Okay.
in the beginning, it was $175,000 in the operating budget under the Finance Committee fund. And it was to be used as soon as we knew that there was a overrun, unknown cost or something. Veterans used to get us every quarter because they wanted to make sure that, they would let us know exactly when something was going wrong. I want to say for the past 3 years, I think a little was used. Sometimes you had this big bounce at the end of it. We cleared it. Yeah, the finance director cleared out the whole,
We zeroed it last year, we zeroed it the year before.
with all balance transfers, though, not.
Oh, it's still in the budget. It's still in the
That's what I'm saying.
budget from FY, from last year. It's still in, there's a lot
Like
of,
24
Well, last
or
year, we used
23?
80,000 of
Yeah.
it to settle that lawsuit.
So exactly, the question is, should it be used when needed or used at the end of the year for the sweep?
Well, it's a combination.
Sure.
If we
That's
hadn't
the
had,
thing.
if we hadn't had anything go wrong all year long, then the money's still sitting here, that we could take advantage of it, typically the first meeting in July, when we find out what the final numbers are. But we've had years where it was $52,000 for that dump truck for the town. We tied up $71,000 for the Cascade machine. Now, ARPA did come through, and they paid it, but there was a point in time where $71,000 was set aside in case. So if somebody came with a need at that point, and that's when the reserve account was only $125. We bounced it to $175 just last year. 2 years ago, it was $125.
But just on the mechanics, if it's 175, whether it's in the department head cost center like it used to be, or whether it's a revolving fund, they still get to use the 175 whenever it's required.
whenever it's needed. The only difference is that if it's in a reserve fund or a revolving fund, that money, if it's not used at the end of the fiscal year, it just stays there, similar to like a stabilization fund. So when you see reserve fund, this is just an accounting. I don't want to go into the politics of accounting.
It wasn't like that before Beta.
Okay.
It would, I know because I've looked at the,
Right.
before. It used to like, the year would end and it would just close out
And
if
you
there
would
was a balance.
actually see it in month-end
Okay.
reports.
Exactly.
You'd see expenses out of it in month-end reports, so we could look and see pretty much where we were at as far as what was left.
We keep calling it the reserve fund, but.
Okay, so we
you know,
probably,
it's not.
Well, that's what it was called the day I
we
joined the
probably
finance
want to
committee.
change the name of that because accounting-wise,
It's, yeah. I
it's
agree.
not the same fund, like in accounting-wise, I'm not going to go into too much, but you have your general fund, which covers all of your departments. And then you have your capital fund, that should have a list of all your capital projects. It's just different funds and different reporting that we have to do to the state. And, some of the housekeeping items that I'm working on and will be working over the summer is making sure that the money's in the proper fund, because right now it's all in the general fund, but it's just rolled over year after year after year after year, and it's not closed out. So there was some confusion. I understand now that this should be in the operating budget, and you want this in the budget for $175,000 for the
Yeah.
finance committee. Is that correct?
Well, it's only
Okay.
because it's going to help the town at the end of the year if we come up short.
No, I understand.
So, if we didn't use any of the money,
And no-
maybe you could set it up in a way, so if we didn't use any of the money that year, it could stay there instead of having it, that would dump out into free cash, and then we got to refund it the following.
So right now, there's 150, so some of that money has been spent of the 175, and there's 152,800 right now in that account that you can use. If we kept the 152, it's already there. It's not going anywhere.
Right, that's
And
from FY '24.
This is FY '24 because it's as a reserve fund, it transfers, so pretty much it's there. It's there for FY '24.
If you went
150.
back to soft rate, did it look like that in the program?
It's already in there, and it was, a lot of your funds are just rolled over. There's funds in here from 2017, and so, it's a conversation, as I was saying, the housekeeping, and say, okay, was your intention for this to be a fund based on, I can't go by, what the intentions are. I can only go by how the article is actually written. And so, as you look at as we go into capital, your capital fund article has transfers in there, but they're not capital projects. So those are things that, we have to discuss, but not right now. But I know that right now you want the 175 in operating, we can make that change.
Right, and we got 152 in there now, which means
Yes.
obviously, there's
Yeah.
got to be accounts that are on projection to come up short, June 30th. So that's what that will be money for. And
Right.
22,000 of it was the money that we approved to transfer to the assessors.
Yes.
So you don't want the balance rolled over to next year?
It would go to 175.
So right now in FY '24, you have
Which will
152,800.
most likely be zeroed by July 3rd when you do your year end.
And then if we add, so we have 152,800. If we add 175, then we have 327,800. If it's authorized and appropriated at town meeting in June, you'd have a balance of 325,800 that you could use prior to, by June 30th. And then after June 30th, whatever the balance is in there will go to free cash.
It usually, it should just be.
It zeroes out. Yes, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
At the end of the fiscal, if it's not used by June 30th, it's done.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's almost misleading to put it in the warrant and say that the reserve account's going to have 300 and some
doesn't,
thousand dollars in it.
No, I can't do that.
It's because you already have money in there from last year that wasn't, you have money in there, and I'll tell you where.
Yeah, I understand that. And if this town meeting had been held in April and we hadn't touched that account at all, there would have been 175 sitting in that account. And you'd be trying to put another 175 in it for July 1st, giving the impression it would then be $350,000 that we really wouldn't have, because June 30th is when it all hits the fan, and we end up using all of that reserve money to make the rest of the budgets town-wide whole.
Okay, so what we'll do is for this year, we'll make sure the language in there shows that it's finance, we'll figure out a term to use, that the 175 will go back in as an operating expense for the finance committee.
Yep.
I mean, you can call it
For
an emergency
FY
account,
25.
Unexpected revenue, unexpected expense account.
June 30th.
June to be.
Yeah, so that's fine. I can make that adjustment. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. You had me nervous with the 81. I'm sorry for taking so long with this, but
It's okay, and you still have the 152,800 in FY '24.
Yes.
Well, that won't last long.
24.
Yeah,
That-
that we
that-
plan to spend.
Yes.
that'll be gone the first week of July. I promise.
So there were a few adjustments we need to make. So we had the school police security that just came up recently at $50,000. This is overtime for the school police that they wanted as a shared, that be part of the shared cost. So you see the 50,000 in here.
But that's just, that's for the one cop, am I right, Elaine?
It's overtime for any officer that fills that spot, yes.
So then, this is not the SRO. The SRO is something separate,
Yes.
and that's still coming out of the town's pocket.
I believe the SRO was out of the police budget, yes.
So we're paying for the SRO in the school, and they're giving us 50 grand toward the overtime for a second cop that might have to go to the school? That
How-
seems fair to
How
me.
did they do that before?
They gave 80,000 last year to the overtime budget to pay for the second cop.
I think
They should split that right down the middle.
I think it just goes to the school.
The, moving on, we have the middle school
Can I just ask a
capital.
Yeah.
question? Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Why would operating monies be, I guess I'm trying to get stuff out of shared costs, or that's my opinion, but we're putting small stuff into shared costs. Why shouldn't this be something just put on the school, on the police budget, and adjust the split down so it covers it?
Yeah.
So it is in your shared costs, if you look at your warrant, shared costs are all operating expenses in the general fund on the town side. If you look at warrant, you have your shared costs, it was around like 10.68 million for last year. The reason you don't see them in the budget is because they're just listed in the shared costs, but if you were to run a soft rate, if you run a software Veda report, you're going to see the account code for that department that manages. So for snow and ice, there's nothing in the budget where you see shared costs, snow and ice. The snow and ice shows up in the operations and maintenance budget because snow and ice is a public works and expense. So this expense is in the police budget for $50,000. All of these shared costs are expenditures in the operating budget, which you're going to see in the operating budget.
Yeah, we totally get that.
Okay.
I think it's, again, if we had our old forecast spreadsheet, we would, we would see it, I think, because then it would be up
Well,
above.
this is a new format.
It's a whole new format, I know. But I think it's hard to look at this and then see this percentage go up for the school, because we have more costs that are coming out total above the line, but then there's still a huge percentage down here, where I would think the percentage would have fallen down a little bit on the school, come up on the town, because of this police officer
IT.
and everything else. IT, lease,
sure.
the lease of the copy machine.
Copy machines, 70% of that number is utilized by the school. Why is this in the shared costs? Why isn't it in the school's budget? They're not our copy machines, they're their copy machines.
I think this is a discussion that we need to have, but I don't know in terms of light of time, because a lot of this is
Well,
going
we
by.
can't do it now.
No, but a lot of this
But
is
I don't know how
going
we can
by,
vote
I'm mirroring,
with this.
I'm mirroring what you had in the budget for FY '24 coming in, but it sounds like there's a lot of changes that need to be
Well, there
made.
sure are.
That we need to sit down and discuss, but I'm really mirroring what you did in FY '24 and trying to come up with numbers that can accommodate some of the needs. I mean, if you look at unemployment, we originally had unemployment at 50,000. We increased that to 100 because of the amount of unemployment claims that are coming through that are over. Right now, we're spent already $114,000
Who the hell have we laid off?
in FY '24. So those are, what happens of, I'm going to allow.
I didn't know we laid anybody off.
Well, you don't have to lay someone
No.
off to have to pay unemployment. So unemployment,
This is
they,
our premiums?
so
They'll
this
pay
is what the
premiums.
town gets charged.
And that's what I thought.
So they take a look back and
Goes back.
you could work for the town and work 2 other jobs. And you could get laid off from those other 2 jobs and file for unemployment for any employer you've worked for in the last, I don't know if it's 14 months or however far.
Yeah,
However
she's
far
right,
back
it's
they go.
like 12 months.
So the town is on the hook for any employee that works for the town that has another job that they could then get laid off from.
Or if they left here on their own, went somewhere else, but then got laid off, we still get.
Right, you still get a look back.
Really?
Yep,
Yeah,
Seems fair to me.
it's always been
Yeah.
that way.
And can I ask a question on the health insurance of $5.4 million? Is this the net number after the employee contributions?
This is the cost for the town.
So this is after the employee portion is paid?
That's
Whether
correct. So that you have the-
45% or 50%?
That's correct. We only keep track of the portion that the town pays. The employees is the cost that we pay. It comes out
So
of
the
our
real
checks.
health insurance that's paid townwide is like $7.5 million?
Yes, it's pretty high.
Okay.
And then you have, so I increased, the unemployment was increased to 100,000, to accommodate just the expenses of unemployment, and the middle school capital reserve, there was conversations that the money hasn't been spent, but we wanted to make sure that money was still going into that. So there was a reduction of 25,434, but we wanted to still make sure that there was money part of that. So with that said, that gave us our total shared operating revenue, which is on previous shared
This
costs.
is cost, though, not revenue,
Yes, excuse me,
right?
costs. I'll update that to costs.
Okay.
Excuse me. So as we look at the base, we have you have your revenue at the 48,687,000 minus the shared costs, which then the base that we used is the revenue base that we used was 35,449,195 to determine that 68.4% split.
But I guess
I'm already good, yeah.
you want to ask the question, or you want me to ask the question?
Go ahead.
So the 68% number comes from the school coming up with their budget of saying, we need $24,247.250. You guys got 35 million, so let's work those calculations out. And oops, look at this, we get 68.4%. Is that how this works?
No, that wasn't how it worked. Prior to me coming, the different drafts that were prepared already had that 64%, 68.4% split. I was not aware that that percent should have been a different percent as we were doing these allocations. That was the amount that was provided and that was worked on for more than 6 or 7 months with George. If that was not communicated or if there was some miscommunication between that, that's the number that I worked off of, but I didn't change it.
I do have a quick question before. So when you go to tab 1, it says the total revenue is the 52,000,009. But then when we go to tab 3, we're only bringing over the 48 million, which is off like 4.2 million.
4,265,747.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at the shared cost, the way the town has...
I'm looking at the revenue.
She's looking at total revenue.
When you're looking at total revenue, the total revenue here for your state aid is net all of your charges. And that's what the town has done in past practice. They take the total amount of your state aid, which is a 13 amount, we can go over that. And then they take out this is a formula that the town has used. They take the total amount of state aid, which is the 13,740,661, minus the library offset receipts, minus the school tuition, and that gives you your net school amount that you see in the shared. And that was a formula that has been used in the past that we use. The only reason you're seeing the difference is because I'm now providing you with transparency of what that revenue actually looks like. That's why I mentioned before that we really need to have a conversation in the summer. And I don't think it's something that we can have in an hour or two. We really need to look at what this looks like and get a really good understanding. Okay, what does the committee want? I mean, if you want a 70-30% split, you want a 67, 65, 66, what does that look like in terms of what the school needs are, in terms of what we have on the town side? What does it look like in terms of, COLA increases for employees? What does it look like in terms of, inflation? What does it look like in terms of, economic changes? I think that there's a lot more involved into figuring out these percentages that need to take time to really dig and dive and figure out what you want as a committee and how you want to spend your money.
Well, I know I would want the percentage to be what it was last year, because we don't know how it came up this year.
And it's not necessarily what we as a committee want to see. It's basically what is the proper split supposed to be? And I think that there should be some kind of a subcommittee or whatever put together of knowledgeable people, okay, that can come up with a process to get to the split. Now, and I think that because we have a new finance director and a new town administrator coming on, that should be one of their primary objectives, is to get to the bottom of that. Now, there's some of us that can be very helpful to you in getting there. But it's not what the Finance Committee wants. It's what's a fair process going to be? And I don't know the answer to that, but there is an answer.
Yeah,
and that's what we've got to get to.
I don't think we can just, if someone could tell us how George came up with this percentage.
Well, there's a lot more in the shared costs than there was before. So this is messing with the numbers. Now you've stuck the pilot agreements into local receipts. There's inflation going on all over the place here. The school originally was supposed to cut like $900,000 out of their budget, and now it looks that we haven't had to cut anything out of any budget. I mean, what, we started out $1.4 million short, then it went down to $1.1 million short, and of that $1.1 million, the school was gonna have to take care of $850,000 or whatever it was. And now suddenly, we're looking at a $24,247 budget for the school, and an $11,261 for the town, which is, they got an $18 million payroll. And I guess my question with the splits goes is, what happens next year when more teachers take the step and the grade and the master's degree and there's 6, 7, 8, 9% raises, and we're playing with 2.5% levies? What happens then?
So we can definitely try to get in touch with George and find out what the basis of that split was, because that's what we were working off of. And I do know the school has made cuts, the town has made cuts, and those have stayed in place.
But I don't think the school's made $800,000 in cuts.
I don't know their number that they've made, but I do know they have made cuts to date.
I was told now there are no layoffs. So we went from 4 layoffs to no layoffs.
Well, there's a couple non-hires.
Right, I think 2 were due to attrition.
Okay.
Is what they presented to you last week, and they are losing 2 positions, but it was due to attrition.
But they're not, right, but they're
No
not, and they're not
layoffs.
No
filling.
layoffs.
Right.
They're gonna move teachers.
No
from
layoffs.
one
Right,
grade to
they are
another.
not planning on refilling those positions.
Don't get me wrong, I don't want to see the layoffs either. But, you know, I've made this statement a dozen times now. We have a $33 million tax levy and a $36 million payroll. So the numbers going forward at 2.5% increases with whatever payroll is going to go up, the formula doesn't work going forward long-term. So 2 years from now, 3 years from now, that spread's going to get bigger. Because it's going to just get bigger. It's the way it works. It's going to be exponential. And then you might have a year where the school budget could conceivably crash if, 10 of the top teachers finally reached their retirement age and they all would have bailed out, but you still got to hire teachers. So we need to look at sustainability going forward and where this is going to take us over the next 5 years, 10 years. Chief Dufley said the same thing. We thought we had a bargain. If an officer were to retire at his sergeant pay and so forth, all his longevity, whatever that X amount of dollars is, $130,000 a year, something like that, and we bring a new guy in out of the academy. Well, the new guy still costs us 60 grand, but that's not true. The new guy really costs us $100,000 because we had to pay for the academy, we got to outfit him, and we got to babysit him for 6 months till he can figure out how to get down West Street. So there's a learning curve before we can put him out by himself, is what I was told. So coming out of Secret Service, we get to bring somebody over that's experienced, but they're not coming over for $60,000. So we're paying more money for them. And that's fine. Talent costs money. But we need to look at where we're going in the future because the two numbers don't work. The levy and the payroll. And that it's just going to get, health insurance is going to go up. We have a warrant article this year to roll back the percentage of health insurance back to what the deal was when the deal was made. So, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out that we're heading in the wrong direction. We dodged the bullet this year. We're not looking for a $4 million override like some towns or a $9 million one like a town north of here did last year. But I don't even want to see us looking for a $500,000 override, because I don't believe this town's going to go for it. And I don't blame them if they
We need
don't.
some new growth, that's what we need. We need new growth.
We need new growth. That's absolutely correct.
We did our contribution.
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
one thing that I can do.
Sorry, we're not beating you up. Please don't think we are.
I don't think that at all. It seems that what I can do is I can look and see what the split was, the percent last year. I can run the numbers with the split so you can see what that looks like. With the additional $50,000 that we have for the police department, we have the $250 that we put in for overlay, and you can see what that number looks like for the school department. So I can put that, I can still do that.
Part of the problem is consistency.
That's what I
You
was
know,
gonna say.
we have not, for the last 10 years, been consistent within this building. And that's a big part of the problem. That is a huge part of the problem.
Sure.
And we had a town administrator a while ago, he was OPEB obsessed. You know, everything's about OPEB. You gotta do this, you gotta do that, you know? And then other people come in, and then we had interims, and then, you know, and you don't get the consistency and the stability, which is what, you know, when I've been saying this, and part of the, you know, the screening committee for the new town administrators, one of my big things was that we've got to get back to stability and consistency. And that starts and stops up here on this floor with the fine lady here and the guy that's going to be in there. And they're the ones that have to provide this, and you have to provide it here, and it's got to be down into the ranks, into the other floors, and into the school department. And that's where it starts and stops. And until we get that stability and consistency, we're just going to continue on this stuff and wondering, you know, why is the percentage this? Why is the percentage that? Well, you know, we've got it now, so we live with it. And there's not much, there's
So
nothing
can I
we're going
just-
to do about this one.
Who gets
But
to
in the
make that?
future-
Like, who makes these choices now
I don't
that
know.
we're just putting 50,000 of school police security up? Like, who says, I don't want to pay for that out of my budget anymore, put it above the line?
So that was not in anyone's budget? The police were just going over their overtime account?
So they were paying for it before?
Yeah,
Yeah.
last year, the school, out of their budget, I believe it was $80,000, went over to the school for the overtime because there was a cop in each building.
Yep.
Then this year, they didn't have the money. So, I
But
don't
maybe
know.
like that has to happen.
Well, I don't know
Something
how
else
much
is
of this
cut.
50,000, obviously, some of this 50,000 is ours. And what I was told was the school said they might have 10,000 to put toward it. Now suddenly I see a $50,000 number, but I don't really know where that came from. So, but if they want to put an officer in each school, but they don't want to pay for it,
Yeah.
then, I mean, I have a problem with that. You know, I mean, I appreciate they want to hire teachers. I appreciate they have a curriculum they want to follow, and they want 19 kids in the classroom, because God forbid they should have 25. And the problem I have is, they don't want to pay for the rest of the frills that they want. And I don't believe that an officer in each school, in this day and age, is a frill. I think it's a requirement. But that's just me, and I'm crazy, so.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, I agree with what everybody's saying. As you mentioned, Mr. is it Maha, having tenure and having stability in a town where you really understand the culture and you understand the needs and you hear from all stakeholders, because everybody here makes a valid point in terms of how the town should be spending money. You know, as I worked in the city of Cambridge for 17 years, you know, I worked in the city manager's office for 13 years, and that institutional knowledge is key in
Sure.
terms of understanding. I really understand the process of being able to put together a group, look at what our needs are, look at ways to have, you know, policies that we can maintain, because as I mentioned at the last meeting, we're looking at we're not looking at what we're doing right now and 2 years from now, but we're preparing the town of Carver for 10 years from now and 15 years from now. And as we make the decisions, as we look at how debt is dropping off, we need to have a plan on how we're going to utilize that money when that debt drops off. So I feel like, you know, within the short period of time, I can't make those decisions. I think a new town administrator is coming in. I like working for Carver. I can see myself here, you know, till I retire. I really enjoy what I'm doing. I think the people here have been amazing, you know, and the staff and with the committees. And I really would like to build a collaborative working group where we can discuss these things. You know, one of the things, and I know that the committee was nervous in terms of, you know, what are we putting in the budget? You know, are there things that we're missing? Is there things that we don't see? And so I've been really trying over the last 4 weeks to prepare information for you to build confidence that, we're looking at the numbers, we're not trying to hide anything, and we're trying to put everything on the table so people can see what's there. So I hear what everyone's saying, I'm willing to go back, as I mentioned, I'll put the 175 in, we'll see what the numbers are. We need to get it to the school committee because they still have to vote on their budget. Their budget prior to the insurance was originally at $24,189,038. So we'll look at that, but we can look at that. And I've taken notes so that, I will respond to that, and we'll, work on putting together these committees.
We're not solving that tonight.
We're not going to be able to.
No, I don't think it can be
Again, we're down to
solved
the
tonight.
last 4 days here, so,
good. We gotta-
this is really
we gotta
more
move on.
discussion we're having tonight, because there's not much you're going to be able to do with this. But I do know that without that 175, we're going to have a problem at the end of the year. And it's going to be the end of FY '25.
And we
But we
can-
can always deal with that in the fall town meeting, too.
Yeah. And we can
So-
change that. We can change the number of the 175. As we go into the expense budget, you can see that we have allocated money to these stabilization funds, so we can start building that fund up for unforeseen things that come up that may happen in the town that you're going to need. So you'll see that, we're looking out for the interests of the town and not saying, okay, we have an extra 200,000, let me just give it to another department and they can spend it on overtime. We're looking at how can we save the money so that we're not spending it.
But you
I
still,
think-
you
yeah.
still need to plan for the rainy day. We put
Yeah.
what's in the selectmen's hourly budget this year, the 100,000 in that, 90,000, whatever that number is, additional hours.
lowered that this year,
75?
72.
So, and that's very necessary, because, if somebody goes out, you need to fill that spot. In fact, we used that money when Kevin Forge got the raise, that came out of there. So it's no different than having a reserve. That's what that is. That the additional hours is a reserve account.
Are we investing that money? Or is
Let's
it
not
just
have that conversation tonight.
Just an account?
I believe we are. We've made some money on investments.
Can I ask a quick question on the shared cost list, the
Yes.
excluded debt, $1,193,050. I see the breakdown here in the schedule. Is the $100,000 that we agreed to pay down the elementary school debt in that number?
For the new elementary school?
Yes, about one of the agreements that we made with taxpayers when we funded the elementary school, the middle school, was it would get paid down based on the current
Oh,
debt
yes, that's for the
model,
120.
Plus
We-
$100,000.
Yes, we have the 120, that's in the operating budget. This is, so the debt exclusion includes a variety of projects. I can give you a list of those projects if you like, to show a breakdown of the excluded debt, non-excluded, and then the 120, the debt that you're talking about, is in the
100.
budget.
I'm not aware it's 120, I thought it was 100 even.
No, 120 is a short-term loan.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not.
But above and beyond the amortization of debt, there was an advance pay down of $100,000. Okay.
I can look
If you
into that,
check.
John. I can look into that.
When you look into that, I think I remember, you might just want to double check that the revenue formula used to have it like embedded into the spreadsheet, like minus 100 and then 100 down below. So it wouldn't be in the levy. Does anyone remember that?
So
I
it's
wanna
not,
check
so
it.
it's not in the levy, and to be honest, there's a lot of past practice, and as I mentioned before, it's not going to be in my due diligence just to do what other people have done, without being able to have the time to really dig in and look and understand what has been done. And I don't want to jump to the conclusions and adding things in, and because it's been in there before. There were items that I've seen in the warrant that I need to be very conservative because we are going to have to cover some things this fiscal year.
So I understand, I can tell you're getting angry. It's just that.
Oh, no, I'm not getting angry, but I
Where-
just want to make sure that, no, I'm not getting,
It's just that we're not comfortable,
No.
that's all. So if we seem frustrated, it's because we're
Oh,
not
she means
comfortable.
we're
no, that's
getting
okay.
angry.
I don't,
Maybe it's me.
no, I'm not angry, but, there's things that I've seen in the FY24 budget where there are going to be shortfalls, significant shortfalls based off of decisions that were made by the town.
And that's the reason for the
Yeah,
reserve
why
account.
And that, but it's a little bit more,
That's
it's a little
exactly
bit more than what you have in the reserve
Of course
account.
it's way
That's why I
more than
really
that.
want to be conservative with the decisions that I make, and I don't want to just jump into making a decision without having the background and having the information to support it. You know, as I'm going through the reports, as I mentioned, you know, in Veda, there's just a lot of information that's not in there yet. I'm reviewing reports of software. There's a lot of journal entries that have been made. There's a lot of hands that have been in the pot.
Listen, I
Auditors
wish
have
you
been in.
started here in June.
And so I really need to evaluate that before I can make a decision, but based off of the information I had, you know, working with Elaine, I tried to, you know, put it together this way. But I'm
quarter of
definitely,
nine.
I know.
I don't want you to think that I'm
I know.
mad, because I'm not.
Well, we're going to be here half the night. Can we go some other page other
Yes,
than
would you like to
4?
look, well, we can go to the,
Where would you like to go next?
would you like to go,
To a quick one.
let's,
5?
I'd say we can go to the detail of the budget so that you can see what each budget has been allocated. So you want to turn to tab
5?
8.
8?
Go to 8.
11? Okay, let's try this.
Tab 8.
You want to turn to tab 8, and as you're looking at this budget,
what
as you're
we're
looking at the detail, the detail shows what
Is
was...
this, I'm sorry, is this final? This
Yes, yes, this is final.
Well, can you say it's
It-
final, even though we know that things have to get changed?
So one thing, the $175,000 that was in the warrant as a reserve, we're going to be making that adjustment for it to go into the operating budget, so we'll be making that adjustment. So as we go through this, since this is, you know, a working committee, to look and review the budget and make sure there's nothing missing, make
So
sure
some-
that...
So something like that, so that like, you had 83,000, we're saying it's 175. So the difference of that, where is it gonna pull from?
The 170, I'll show it to you in the budget, because all of the shared costs are in your operating budget, and they're listed under the department. So that 175 that you're talking about, if we go, with my understanding, that was a reserve fund, which you explained wasn't, is going to be moved from the reserve fund, and you'll see it in the finance budget.
It's not in the finance budget.
It's going to be moved
Oh.
there, because I have it, if you go to, if you go to page, and I can just explain this.
I'm just thinking they only
Here's
have
the
a
summary.
certain pot of money to spend, so someone
Yeah.
else is gonna have to,
Take a hit.
yeah.
Okay. It's either we put it aside now, or we have to find a way to
Okay.
put it aside
No,
later.
no,
We're
just
gonna
mean
spend it.
one of these areas is gonna have to get changed.
Yeah, and they already know they're gonna come up with some shortfalls, and 152 is not gonna cut it. And we knew that last year.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the 175 will just be, it's already in the budget. If you go to, if you go to page 2, I'm just gonna go through the
Page.
summary. Every tab 2, if you go to tab 2, it's gonna be the second page, and it starts with Article FY24 at the top, and it says FY25 Budget Summary Final, and it has the type of expense where you have your salary and you have expense. You have your FY24 adopted, but this is only Appendix B, because the town does not adopt the appendix, they adopt the bottom number. I put the appendix in there so that people could be able to compare FY '24 to '25. You're not going to see totals
What
at
am I
the very
missing?
bottom, because
Second
the
page.
appendix numbers, there were some formular errors that the numbers don't add up, but I wanted to I can walk you through this so that you can see, I think, and then if you want additional detail to see what
Oh, there it is.
the expenses are made out of and what the salary's made of, we have the detail that is on tab 8, which has a detail for the department. So if you'd like, we can just walk through.
But that's, excuse me, I don't,
Yes.
even though it's on page 2, it's still the 83,100. The 175 that we're looking at is appropriated for FY '24. The last column is FY '25 proposed, which is 83,000. To me, that looks like a cut.
Yeah.
So,
Am I wrong?
That's how I read it.
I mean, no? This is 24, this is 25. In order for it to still be 175, it should say 175. Okay, I want to make sure it wasn't me.
So the 83,000, that should be the 175, we're going to change that because the shared, so as you're looking at this document, if you go back to your shared costs, because the shared costs are part of your operating budget, what I did is I included the shared cost in the department that it falls under. So as we go through, then I can change that 83
Yep.
to the
To
175, because right now it's
Where are you going
showing
to grab
what
the
I
90
presented.
from?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
I'll have to make those adjustments.
But like
But I have
where?
to, we can walk through and I can show you.
No, you don't need to, we don't need to walk through it, I'm just,
It's
my
gonna-
point is, you're
it's-
going to have to take the 90 from somewhere
Yeah, I'll tell you
else.
where it's gonna come. If you go to page 3, so if everyone's looking at tab 2,
Tab 2.
and you go to, this is
Page
part
3.
of the budget summary final, there's page 1 of 3 in the budget summary final. If you go to, if you go to page, if you go to page 2, and at the bottom, you're gonna see other budget transfers. And this is where, as we're looking at preparing a balanced budget, we were allocating money into stabilization funds so that they're in the proper fund.
So
So if you look, you see we have 100,000 allocated to the stabilization fund. We have 100,000 allocated to the debt stabilization fund. There was 99.
So are you now thinking of pulling it out of our stabilization funds?
No, so these amounts here can be
Pull pieces
adjusted.
of it.
They can be adjusted. The numbers have to be
Gonna pull bits and
adjusted.
pieces out of it.
The numbers have to be, and if you look, there wasn't money going in there in FY '24, but what we try to do is we try to accommodate, it's not gonna be it's not gonna be total amounts, but we wanna be able to put something in there. But if we add the 75, we will have to make that adjustments, but my suggestion would be within the amounts that we were gonna be putting into these different reserve funds, because then it won't touch the operating budget in effect.
But should it touch the operating budget? I mean, are we just playing around with numbers so we don't touch the percentage?
Yeah,
Through you, Mr. Chair.
sure.
So I just want to mention the stabilization fund. So the financial management policies want us to fund 7.5%, and that 100,000 is well over that amount. I believe 7.5% with the balance right now is about 42,500, I think we had it, and so we just increased that. So by decreasing it, even if we decreased it to 50,000, we're still putting in
Still over
more
the 7.5,
than that
which is the policy.
7.5%.
Yeah, no, she'd be right. And the fire public safety equipment revolving, that 10.5, last year that 10.5 was in his budget. It didn't belong in his budget. That's why it's down here. So it's the same thing we've always done with the fire department budget, just put it in a new place. That isn't created, because you see a zero the previous year.
And last
what's
year,
the
I'm
fire
sorry.
truck?
Last year, there was no money put into the debt and stabilization fund. So even if we reduce that, that's still more money than was put in there last year.
And we're paying off a fire truck. Well, actually, that's
It was-
paying,
Is
I
that-
believe it's three.
paying
fire-
off 3
I think
fire
it's 3 fire
trucks.
trucks, yeah.
Right, because we bonded all 3 trucks in one whack.
Why are we paying them off?
Because
Versus
we had
having,
an extra
we have a nice low rate.
$376,000, we didn't know what to do with it.
So as we talk about debt service, the rates are very low. They're very low, and Mr. Carter, I did get your email in terms of what was what was discussed at the capital meeting, because apparently there was $1.2 million that was going to be bonded to cover different capital projects. That was not in any of the capital articles authorizing that bond issue. So I think these are the meanings.
This was last year?
What?
We, in FY '22, 2022, you authorized $1.8 million, and that was for capital. That was to cover the library HVAC project. That's the only
That wasn't
authorization.
22, that
was
was...
in 23.
Was it in '23?
23.
Okay, excuse me,
3 or 4,
FY
yeah.
'23.
No, it's 23.
Excuse me, FY '23, there was an authorization of $1.8 million.
When
There was
we
one
look-
last year,
when we
too.
looked at the 2024 operating budget,
No, it was last year,
I
so
mean,
that would have been the
capital budget.
FY '24. It would have
Yeah.
been,
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been it would have been the meeting in 2023 for FY '24.
So, yeah, so what, we had all these capital items. First, we cleared out all the old capital items, right? We're
Yes.
trying to get rid of that. Then we looked at some big numbers, because we had some projects we wanted to do,
Mm-hmm.
of prior balances that were approved but not funded. No one
That's
touched
right.
them.
Yep.
So then we voted to move that in to get some of these other capital items paid and borrow on those other items. There was already a 1.8 borrow done, whatever year,
Yeah,
but
so
there was
we-
supposed to be a second one done that I don't think was ever done. Am I-
It wasn't done, so the only thing in the warrant is the $1.8 million authorization, and that was for, and what happened is that if you look at the FY '24 warrant, you allocated $700,000 of that bond issue to cover previous projects, however, that money's already been spent. So
But that was supposed to be put towards capital for FY '25, if I remember correctly.
That's
Oh, no,
in the
there's a
warrant, it's in the FY
490.
'24.
It was 490. I'm
490.
sorry, it was 490.
490.
So where,
yeah.
and that 490 came over, right? It's in the million, the 1.2 million?
Yeah, so we have 490 that's in a debt stabilization fund that's supposed to be used to cover debt service payments, but in the warrant for the capital projects, within the warrant for the capital projects, you have $700,000 of that 1.8 bond issue covering FY '24 capital projects, but that money's already been spent. So I've really tried to look at being
How did it
conservative.
get spent?
Well, they did the siding.
They
of
did the
town
pro,
hall.
they,
Oh,
they,
for that stuff,
the
okay.
project
Somebody had to
came
write a
in,
check.
the project came in at
Return.
1.8 something million, they spent the money. But the money in the warrant, 700 of that money that's already been spent was allocated to cover projects for FY '24. So as I'm looking at the
Probably
budget,
HVAC.
Yeah.
as I'm looking at the budget, I'm not trying to pull money, the different projects, but I'm really trying to think strategically, how am I going to cover the deficit in FY '24, still allow money to go into different stabilization funds, look at how we can balance the budget and make sure that the services that the department needs are actually going to be met, and the contractual obligations that we have regarding salary. So those are things that I'm thinking about as I'm looking at how we allocate the money, because there's some, there's things in FY '24 that we're going to have to cover that there isn't money here for. If we were looking at going to bond, like right now, we're renewing the band.
So do we at least have a hiring freeze, knowing that? For all positions?
Excuse me?
If
I'm
we
sorry.
have a deficit coming up, do we have a hiring freeze?
Oh, there is a deficit because you have allocated money that's been spent, but there's other ways that we're going to be able to offset that deficit through capital projects.
But I just think there should be a hiring freeze. If there's a deficit, we shouldn't be bringing on more employees.
This is for capital.
Yeah, this is for capital. This is just for capital.
This is for capital.
So your
'cause we-
deficit's not just capital, it's only
this is-
capital,
this
it's not
is for-
everything?
This is for capital. This is just for capital.
Okay. So maybe our next meeting, you could come to just talk about that to the capital outlay committee?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I just saw it the other day as I was going through the FY '24 budget. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to, there's a lot of meetings that I still need to have outside of, working on getting this budget done. I mean, we have auditors that have been here. There's been a lot of people that are doing things and working on the budget, and I have to have time to go through what they've been doing, making sure that what has been recorded, the journal entries that have been processed, have been processed accurately to make sure that the budget that we have matches what you adopted for FY '24.
There's no question, it's been a rough 5
Oh, yeah.
weeks, 4
Yeah,
weeks.
no, I get it.
for
But
this.
can I just ask, getting back, maybe the 376 that we're paying down on this fire truck early?
There's 3 fire trucks, John.
3 fire trucks. Is that, now that would have had an effect to lower shared costs, which
Or
increased
pays
money
them
for the
off.
operating
But if
budget.
there's a deficit in
that-
capital,
is that-
why are we paying them
Is that
off?
why, is that the reason it was done, or was another reason it was done?
Because there's money.
I wasn't, I wasn't here from that. I would have to look into that, John. I don't know.
Okay, if you can.
You hit the nail on the
I
head,
think
John.
that was a decision prior.
That's exactly why it was done. Because that would take the debt service that was in the budget
Down.
down, which would increase the percentage
Yes.
to the school. So we're taking money out of free cash, I
Right.
assume, and we're paying off 3 fire trucks in order to remove out of the line item in
Yep.
the budget paying off the debt service on the fire truck, thus saving that percentage for the split. Did that make sense?
Could be.
Can I just have one more
No, that's
question.
fine.
All these things in the other budget transfers, who decided what went in here? Was it like department heads? Like, who makes that decision?
It's all John.
So obviously, the stabilization fund, we have to fund the balance of that 7.5%. Compensated absences, that is for when people leave or retire. So when someone leaves, they are legally entitled to be paid out their vacation time, or if they retire, some of them are contracted to get paid out
They're planning.
So,
portions of their.
But what, don't you do some type of a PTO accrual for that every month?
I don't know if payroll does that, but
Usually, like, you have like a big PTO accrual that's happening.
yeah, that would be on payroll if they
But
did
if they're
that.
doing an accrual, would you really need this? I wonder if we should check.
I don't know if that's being done. I'm not sure. We'll have to look into that. So that's what that fund is for. The opioid settlement, for any funds received, I think it was like sometime before November of 2023, it went into certified free cash, and you have to do a vote to get that out of, into a fund for the police to use for services to help the opioid problem. So that is the amount of funds we received prior to that date. Anything received after that date, the DOR doesn't require a vote of town meeting for the funds to go directly into a special, like a reserve type of a fund. It's not really a revolving account, but I guess it would be like a reserve fund.
So basically, they paid us $48,000 and we need to vote to give it to the police department?
Yeah, so the town is part of a litigation settlement for opioids. It's a national lawsuit, and we are part of it. So we are getting funds in. They can only be spent on help outreach to the community, things like that.
And this was before FY23?
These funds were received during FY23, or I'm sorry, yeah, during FY23. They had to get certified for free cash before we could touch them. So that is the amount we have to take out of free cash to put into a different fund so they can be spent.
So is it like your Narcan, all that, Narcomox, all that stuff?
Yeah,
You know, like the nasal sprays and...
I can just add to that. So there was a change, DOR had a change when all of the communities were receiving the opioid funds. We were told to put them in a revolving fund, and then that changed, and then we had to take them out. And every community was told that the opioid funds now had to be put into a different type of reserve,
Okay.
and it had to be taken from free cash. So that's something that all towns have been pretty much told that we had to move it out of particular funds. It's more of an accounting procedure for that, but it's something that we are mandated to do by DOR.
And I know back then you used to be able to go up to, say, a hospital's window or something, and you could get the Narcan and all that for free. Does that tick off the balance here?
No, I think what this is for community engagement
Okay.
to help the epidemic.
Okay.
And I think it has to be used for that. So I know the police chief has programs that he would like to use that money on. I think it's through Plymouth County. And that $10,500 for the public safety equipment fund, that is a fund that was established several years ago, and they would like to keep the balance at $50,000 every year. So to date, that is the amount needed to get them back up to $50,000 for July 1.
So again, who decides, like, do all the chiefs get together and that's how this...
So it's just the account, when the account gets spent down.
Oh, they could do it.
It's a different amount
Okay.
every year. I think last 2 years it was like 22,000 or something like that. So the amounts that have to stand are that 10,500, the 48,579, and an amount for the stabilization fund, which is well less than 100,000.
So the ones that we don't need then would be, like, uncompensated absences and...
Well, that money's gotta come from someplace.
Well, we do need that.
It's just, it went from 25,000 to almost 100.
Right. Because we know we have, with the June 30th deadline.
There are
for the
people leaving.
Yeah, but you might have an accrual too for your PTO.
Well,
So one,
we need to pay them what's owed to them in their accumulated time.
We know we have retirements coming up. We have an influx of retirements coming up, and we are aware of that, so we want to make sure it's funded, so we don't run any deficit.
so through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, so a lot of communities will have in their benefits or in the HR department a line for sick leave buy and vacation buyback. And so I feel like this fund is what has been used, just as I'm looking at, the expenditures has been used, so if people leave, they don't, if there's money budgeted, sometimes you'll have money budgeted in a department for people that are gonna retire,
How
because
much did you spend last year?
I can look into that, I can tell you what we've spent this year and what we spent last year.
Okay.
But it's well above the amount that we have.
I would just think you have to make some type of a accrual for that to a liability, because that's your liability expense on your payroll.
And that's usually, you would have a line item for your buyback and sick leave. There aren't any line items. That's why I'm saying this, when you're, as you're talking about, how we make decisions, a lot of times these budgets are done in collaboration with the town administrator, with the departments, working groups that are looking at, okay, what are our needs, what are our priorities? How do we, is our priority to put in civilization, is our priority to have a little bit of free cash on the side, not to, have a balance, is our priority to, pay for something out of pay for something, we'll say, out of a debt stabilization fund. But I think that there's been a very short period of time, and with another, George working on this over the last 8 months, me coming in, my top priority was to be able to help Elaine in preparing a balanced budget, but I did not have that opportunity to have the conversations, my conversations that I've been able to have with the departments here in Carver. We're meeting with every department head and going over every single one of the line items, showing what they spent in '23, what was allocated in '24, and what they requested in '25, and looking at ways that we could save money possibly, if they're not spending it.
And the fact is that as hard as all that is to do, we still have costs that are etched in stone. We have contractual obligations, and we have general inflation. It's like trying to budget for gasoline and diesel fuel for the school side. We still don't know what's going to happen to those costs. So you budget for it. We've got some ridiculous number for snow. I don't know how it ever got that big, which we seem to be not having any snow anymore. But we can't reduce it, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, but that's the one account we can deficit spend, but we can't reduce. I think that what's going to end up happening is we're going to have no choice come tomorrow night with the select board, and they're going to have no choice come the deadline on Friday to present a balanced budget that we're going to have a fall town meeting to fix what's wrong with it. Not that you've done anything wrong, so please, either one of you, don't misinterpret that statement. But Karen came in just late to the game enough, and we're at the 11th hour, and there's no time to go drill down and play anymore. So we're going to have to present a level-funded budget, a budget that we can live with, and right up until we find out in the fall that we can't. And I mean, maybe I'm describing it the wrong way, but that's the way it seems to me. We don't have a choice. You could give us anything you wanted to give us right now on this piece of paper, and if it balanced out, we really don't have a lot of options but to say, okay, because Friday's the end of the line. And we can't kick the meeting off any further. So...
But again, we go back to the point of what's been going on the last 10 years.
Yeah, but we can't do anything about that tonight, though, Pat.
No, but we can't do anything about
Yeah, I
any of it.
think-
We can only fix it going forward.
Right, we are all in
That's what
agreement.
we need to do.
Yeah, I think we are all in agreement that there needs to be meetings, these discussions need to be had, policies need to be put in place that are current with what the needs are of the town. And I know there were working groups this past year. I don't know that anything changed as far as the policies didn't change or anything like that. So, you know, we were brought forth with a budget that was started. So we are seeing that budget through, and, you know, the operating costs are covered through the levy, so.
We gotta go back to all the changes that have been going on up here. There's no stability, no continuity, and that to me is probably the biggest issue for all of these things.
Believe me, I wish there was a simple solution to this, and I'll be honest with you, I really,
There isn't a simple one.
no, I absolutely, thank you so much for I love the job you're doing. Like, I swear to God, I wish you were here 6 months ago. I don't think we'd have anywhere near this amount of heartburn. This is, we're where we are because circumstances put us here. And you know, there's nobody that I blame, even if it is all John's fault. I don't blame him.
Not even John, there's no blame.
There is no blame. There's just been,
Circumstances.
yes, the last 3 years,
Lousy circumstances.
with all due respect, the last 3 years with the previous finance director have been a little bit helter-skelter, just to say the least. And again, we go back to no long-term knowledge. She didn't know what had happened in the 5 or 6 years. So, you know, we were spoiled in the very beginning with reports and budget information that made sense. And then all of a sudden, you know, don't forget last year and the year before, money was getting pulled out of medical reserve accounts that we had set money, $250,000 we set aside in case the health insurance premiums went through the roof. And then because we didn't use it for 2 years, it was a free-for-all. Oh, let's grab that. And that's exactly what they did. So, you know, I mean, I don't know what the easy solution here is to, I don't want to keep these fine people that got to come to work tomorrow, and we all do too. I don't want to keep them till midnight. I don't know what the answer is for this presentation budget. I mean,
There is no answer.
please, tell me what you want.
You gotta do.
Barry?
I got a question as a novice, so I don't know all the history.
Yeah, but this isn't your first rodeo, so it's okay.
But I'm saying, what I hear from Karen is the numbers are, the revenue matches the expenses, so that's good. But are you saying that's probably not accurate because the reality is that expenses will be higher?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we pass this budget at town meeting the way it's printed right this minute, I'll lay a dinner out at the Four Seasons for everybody in this room that will never close the year with those numbers in June of FY '25.
No, probably not, no.
I mean, it's the safest bet you could possibly make. It's
I wouldn't mind voting on it if I had some clarification on the percentage split.
what?
That's the only thing that
You want
holds
to do
me
that
up.
tomorrow night down at the select board? And I'm
I
not
don't
sure what the hell are we voting on tomorrow night at the select board meeting? Does anybody know? 2 selectmen in the room?
I think the budget was on the agenda, right?
Well, it's on the agenda, but that doesn't mean much.
Well, we're
We're
hoping
not
you,
going over the
we're
warrant.
hoping you're gonna come and say, you fixed it all.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh. Thanks. I thought that was your job. Obviously, you and Dan are taking tomorrow off, and you're gonna save the world.
Yep.
So, I just don't wanna put Karen and Elaine through the rest of what's on this paper if we're concerned that changes need to be made, and then we're back to where we have a problem with, we can't get these numbers on the warrant. If this is balanced out, and I'm not trying to say that we're pulling a fast one, because it's balanced out, but I honestly and truly believe that it's not gonna work out. So I think we're gonna need a fall, and even Mark Townsend thinks we're gonna need, I think you do too, John, I think we're gonna need a fall town
Could be.
meeting, which will get the new town administrator's feet wet. It'll let Karen get more comfortable in the job and let her get her digging done that she needs to get done, so that they'll have accurate, solid, here's what's going on by the end of September into October. and there may need to be some revisions. It could very well be that we get really lucky, dodge the bullet, and they come back and say, what you guys passed is great. We're gonna be all right. Maybe the state will give us an extra $1 million. I wouldn't hold my breath, but you never know. So, I mean, it's up to the pleasure of the board. I don't want to keep going back and forth over stuff with, you know, why isn't this in this line, or why isn't that in this line? As long as it's in there somewhere and it balances out. Aside from the 175, I'm not trying to be greedy, but we're going to need that money in June.
We can definitely get the 175 in, and I just want to assure you, we met with all of the departments. This has been a collaborative engagement in terms of making sure that the departments are providing us with accurate amounts they're going to spend. And, I've been very, very conservative, especially as we look at capital, because I know that, we really need to look at all of the reserve accounts, all of the revolving accounts, see how things are set up, and I think that it needs to be in a collaborative effort. It's not one person saying, hey, I think I'm going to just put this amount of money in here, or I feel like I'm going to just add this to this line. It should be a collaborative engagement.
And that's something that, Elaine, you suggested that a month and a half ago, and then I expanded on it when I said it should also include a sustainability study, which is really the same difference.
Oh, absolutely, and I agree with all of that, and, just as you were mentioning, in the past, you've received reports, so, my goal is that as we get VADAR updated and reconciled, that you'll get monthly reports, not just monthly reports on our expenditures, but monthly reports on our revenue. Because our revenue projections are based off, our expenditures are based off our revenue projections.
That's right.
And if the revenue projections are low, then yes, you may go over. So I really like to have a conservative approach, but a collaborative approach. So, I welcome and look forward to working with everybody on this. I'm glad
The reason that we're...
educate me on the accounts too, because I didn't know.
That's right. The reason why we're where we are this year is because switching over to VADAR, we have never seen a month-end report since July 1st. We never saw July, August, September, October, November, December. We got a year-end, finally. In fact, we didn't even see an FY 23 final actual until...
Recently.
Yeah, it was after the January joint meeting. We still didn't have it. And that's ridiculous. I don't know how you can do a budget without having your 23 as passed, 23 actual, 24 proposed. You need to have the actual.
Yeah, and the actuals, as you look at the detail, I added a column for FY23 actuals, and then I had a column for FY24 expense as of this fiscal year as of March 28th. And even as I go through the budget, I can't even make an estimate on, hey, I see you haven't spent anything. But I don't know if there's outstanding invoices.
That's
I don't
right.
know if departments, I haven't had that chance to talk to them. I know that working with a treasurer, they were behind with a lot of turnover within the office in terms of receipts. So we have staff entering our cash receipts to make sure everything's in the system. So there's just a lot that's still being done, but when I have that information, I'll be more than happy to share that with everybody.
And Pat's 100% right. We need to look at the past practices and over the history of the last 5 or 10 years, and then apply some of the stuff that worked to going forward. And Pat's got history, John's got history. Probably the 2 most knowledgeable guys in the room, or the 3 most knowledgeable. Dan can go back 30 years, but John and Pat, well, you can go back 30 years now. Yeah, you can go back 30. So, these guys have been through the mud fights and the slings and the mad dog arguments at town meeting when we didn't have a town administrator and it was every man for himself, and
The good old days.
the good old days. So thank God, we've come a long way since then. We put down the baseball bats and actually put on some real clothes, so we're doing good, but we still aren't there yet. And I think that stability is everything. We have a select board that is, these 2 gentlemen are very knowledgeable. There's a 3rd former member of the finance committee that's the chair of the select board presently. Pat was the business manager for the schools, plus after you retired, you worked for vocational schools doing business management too, didn't you?
I was in between my two stints here, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Beth's the finance director for Social Hospital, and she only used to go looking for $3 million a day to balance her budget, so, is that about right?
Leave me out of it.
So, you know, there's some talent in the room. And Barry's been around a long time too. So, I just think that we're gonna need to just put our best foot forward in this budget. And it's up to y'all what you wanna do.
Are you
At your
expecting us to
disposal.
vote tonight?
I don't know that we have the ability, we can't vote tonight. We have to get with these guys tomorrow night.
We'll do that tomorrow night,
We'll beat them up some more.
I think.
I would like to see you invite Capital Outlay.
Tomorrow?
Yeah,
We can, but we didn't post an agenda.
so come as guests, I'm sorry.
Okay. If you
Because
guys
they're not
can.
gonna vote on your capital budget,
We're
but I
not.
think that you need to be kept in the loop. So you know what's going on.
Okay.
You
So
know,
even
well,
if-
John's gonna be there, he doesn't have much of a choice.
I'll
Yep.
let Jackie know.
So, and if Jackie can't make it, you don't have to worry about it, because you wouldn't be a quorum.
Yeah.
So what's everybody think? You wanna just see what happens tomorrow night at this point? Are there any more questions on the rest of?
Yeah,
I mean, this was a lot of hard work, and I appreciate it, I really do. This gives us a lot of information that we did not have and we've been asking for.
We hope you find this transparent.
Well, I think that's absolutely correct.
And my office is open. There's a couple of members of the committee that reached out with questions. I said I'll go through them, and so I can share them with all of the committee members with the answers to those. I have days that I'm available, so people want to come into my office. I'm more than willing to have you come in. We can sit down, go through things if you have questions. And I'm open. I can send that availability in the terms of the time that I'm going to be in the office, but people are more than willing. This is the top priority that I'm working on right now, because it's, time is of the essence, but also to make sure that what we're doing is being done accurately.
I'd love that.
Let's not bother her tomorrow, she's trying to finish up.
I don't think you have
I
time.
think she has any free time tomorrow.
Okay.
But we'll share whatever
John, do you
changes
have
we make,
any-
we'll share it with everybody.
You have any questions?
I'm still seeing things, trying to pull this thing together.
Well, what's your opinion of where we're at right this
I don't
minute?
really feel comfortable voting on a budget with all these things moving. So that's my opinion.
Dan, what are your thoughts?
I've got questions, but I'm not gonna go back.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll ask him tomorrow night for this.
Shall I bring a pillow tomorrow night?
Yeah.
Pat?
I'm good for tonight.
I would like to request, if anybody does have any further questions, including select board members, if you could email Karen and myself, that way we have time to prepare the answers and have backup if necessary. That would be helpful in advance.
I think a lot of what we're gonna need to fix is gonna be taken up after July 1st. This is gonna be discussions throughout the summer into the fall when we start working on the FY26 budget and where we start making the changes that we talked about, and that's what the conversation's gonna be. You remember last April, we talked about doing this, and that's when that's gonna start to happen, is when we're moving forward. The FY26 budget will be right on top of us. That'll be a little clearer what's gonna happen, because it'll be after town meeting. We'll know where the votes are on this health insurance gig. We know how many police are leaving or not leaving in retirement. So next year is gonna be a challenge. I think it's honestly gonna be a huge challenge. And the time to start talking about next year's budget is July 2nd. Not that we want you to come in on July 2nd, but you know what I'm saying. And I hated that when they did it before. Oh, we'll talk about the budget. Oh, come on, it's only July, it's only August. We have to deal with the budget until January. Are you kidding me? This is why we're here in April, almost May. So, I have no other questions for you. Tony?
I'm good, thank you.
Barry? Walter? Jennifer?
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome, thank you.
Sorry to put you through this. I know it's 9:30.
This is good.
So,
It's learning.
Yeah.
You actually make me, I mean, even though there's tough times, I'm excited about the future.
I am now, yes.
3 meetings.
Absolutely.
Having you present, fantastic.
Very happy that you're at the helm of the finance department. I knew it was a good choice.
Thank you, I'm glad to be here. I hope I can support everybody.
I think you're doing a great job. Keep it up. Elaine, I think you're doing the job you're doing. I know it's a lot of work.
You're doing it.
You're
doing your
it.
job.
I think, no, I've said it before. You're doing the job you're doing, you're doing a great job at it. It was not what you were used to doing before. You really grabbed the bull by the horns, and you and Karen have been stellar. So you guys have done just a terrific job of pulling this together in a very short period of time.
Thank you. Thank you.
She thinks it's a left-handed compliment. She's trying to still figure out that you're doing what you're doing, you're doing it.
You're doing. I heard it.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
No, you
Hold
can't.
on,
I got
no,
minutes.
but should I adjourn
That's right.
capital? Would you guys like to adjourn the capital meeting?
Sure, motion to adjourn the capital meeting?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion made and second to adjourn the capital outlay committee
I was
meeting
too quick,
at
excuse me.
9:24 PM.
We can table them, but then you gotta
Have
do
a
it
good night.
tomorrow.
Thank you.
I forgot, I was just,
You got the meeting minutes in front of you, so if you read them and like them, I'll take a motion.
I already,
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written from April 25th, 2024.
second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes from April 25th, 2024. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So passed. Now I'll take a motion.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Any further discussion? All those in favor? What?
Okay, never mind. I'm in favor.
Oh, I can, we haven't voted yet.
I'll wait till the next meeting.
Okay. Walter, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are out. Now we're
There we go.